So we'll get started. To be a pilgrim, and this is about my week at the Iona Abbey. This summer, my husband Steve and I had the opportunity to spend a week at the Iona Abbey from June 24th through June 30th. And it was a wonderful experience, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Fun thing, as we were traveling over, I will get into it more, but you do a lot of travel by ferry to get here. And one of the stretches of the ferry, there was all these people getting on, and then look at this one man with these bushy eyebrows, and I thought, he looks a lot like the former Archbishop of Canterbury. And sure enough, it was him, Rowan Williams. And he was staying on the island of Iona, but at the bishop's house, not with us. Yeah, so it was him. It's like, well, he didn't only look like him, it was him. So this is a photograph. This is a road. There's very few cars on Iona. They don't want cars on Iona, so you have to have real special permission to have a car on Iona. So you do a lot of walking. And so when you get off the ferry there, you walk up to the Abbey. The Abbey does have a van that takes your luggage up for you, so you don't have to lug all that. But you do a lot of walking. And this is one of the main paths along Iona. And I just found that charming to see this monk dressed in his monk garb walking. And I didn't want to be so bold as to get in front of him and take his picture. So I did it from behind, but I thought it sort of captures the ethos of Iona, this idea of pilgrimage and spiritual place. And this is ruins of an Augustinian nunnery, which has not been restored. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So Iona has been described by George MacLeod as a thin place where only tissue paper separates the material from the spiritual. How many, show of hands, have in this room have been to Iona, or people on? Okay, would you say that quote is a fair description of Iona? Yeah. So for those who have not been to Iona, take this to heart. It's a thin place where only tissue paper separates the material from the spiritual, and put this on your bucket list to go. Whether you can just go for a day or whether you can spend a week at the Abbey. If you can spend a week at the Abbey, I highly recommend it. So Iona is an island off of the coast of Scotland. And geologists, and this was something that I learned this time, geologists said that some of the oldest stone in the world is found on Iona. That rock that they say is some of the oldest in the world is 2.7 billion, with a B, years old. The Isle of Mull, which is just across the water that you take a bus across, the rock there is 700 million, with an M. I found that staggering. I don't know if that has anything to do with that thin place, but I almost feel like when God created, the dry earth came up from the waters, I think this is one of the spots where it happened. The island itself is small. It's 3 miles long, 1.5 miles wide. Their population now is about 150 permanent residents on the island. This has been a place of pilgrimage for the living and the dead over centuries. 48 kings of Scotland, 4 Irish princes, 8 Norwegian kings, a king of France, and many great Highland chiefs have been carried along the Street of the Dead and buried in the graveyard around St. Oran's Chapel there, which is very close to the Abbey itself. 21 years ago, my husband, Steve, and our children, Ashley, she's the one that's going to have the baby on Tuesday, and Chris, who is the youth director here. You might recognize him. 21, that's before he had any facial hair. 21 years ago, we traveled and did a pilgrimage a week at the Abbey as a family, which was just fantastic. It was the summer after 9/11. So my husband and I were out walking, and you can see it's just very rural. It's very rugged. You're out in the middle of the North Atlantic. And we're just out, and suddenly these jets were flying very low overhead. Like, we hit the ground. I was like, oh my gosh, because you have in your head that, we're being attacked. It was the RAF practicing. Ian knows this. You were in the RAF, weren't you?
No, I was in the army.
Okay. But they were practicing, after 9/11, they were doing their thing. But you thought, oh my gosh, we're in this remote, quiet. Yeah, you thought we were under attack. But 21 years ago, we made this trip, and I knew then that someday I will return. I would say Iona from that trip has influenced my ministry more than anything else in all the years since. And this summer, Steve and I had the opportunity to return again. I've always wanted to get back, so it happened this summer. We got over there on our second pilgrimage to this beautiful holy island. So this is a map, just to give you a sense. You don't get to Iona accidentally. You really need to want to go there. So, we flew from Philadelphia through London to Glasgow, and we take a 3-hour bus or 3-hour train ride from Glasgow to Oban. So there's Oban, and we spent the night in Oban, very tired, but we spent the night in Oban. Then we took the ferry the next morning over to the Isle of Mull. This is the Isle of Mull. And then you get on a bus. And then we rode this bus for an hour and a half across the Isle of Mull. And we had this bus driver who was he almost was a tour guide. It was sort of an extra bonus. He wasn't a tour guide, but he was telling us everything along the way. And, you'd see these old ruts in the road. Like he said, that's where the kings of Scotland would be brought, carried over. So they're all around you. So then we get over here to this end of Iona, and Fennerport, I think. Pennfort is the little town there. So then you get on another ferry, which is just about a 20-minute ferry ride from there to Iona. So this is little Iona. Right there. So like I said, you have to be very intentional to go to Iona. And it's worth taking the time to go there. When we were there, the week we were at the Abbey, there were pilgrims like us who were staying at the Abbey, as well as the staff and volunteers at the Abbey who provide hospitality. From all over the world. There were people there many from the UK, as you would imagine, from France, from Portugal, from Sweden, from the Netherlands, a young woman from Paraguay, which I thought, wow, and a few of us from the USA. We were surprised that we met an Episcopalian pastor, and a woman from his church, and 3 teenage boys, one who was his son, who were also there for the week, who live in Swarthmore. Go figure. There's another Presbyterian pastor and his wife, who are now American, but he's from Glasgow. So he still had very much his Scottish accent, but the rest were from all over the world. So it's a wonderful opportunity to meet people and have conversations in community with people, to just learn different perspectives and hear about their lives and what they're doing where they live. This is a quote that John shared a couple weeks ago when he did his presentation from Thomas Merton. It says the geographical pilgrimage is the symbolic acting out of an inner journey. The inner journey is the interpolation of the meanings and signs of the outer pilgrimage. One can have one without the other. It is best to have both. And that's really a great description of this pilgrimage, of this journey that we participated in with other pilgrims. the life of faith invites us to think about our life's journey as a pilgrimage, as a way of our life is a pilgrimage. And I know I'm taking things that I heard the class share. I watched the recording of John's class a couple weeks ago. So I know he asked you, like, what are some differences between a pilgrim versus a tourist? And some of the things I heard you say, pilgrim is more contemplation, tourist is more sightseeing. Pilgrim implies a sense of respect for where you are, whereas tourist is more casual. Pilgrim seems to be more of a deep presence to a place, whereas the tourist is more of a shallow. Being a pilgrim is to be open to surprise, to receive gifts and hospitality, but also to return it and to give it back. That as a pilgrim, you immerse yourself in the culture where you find yourself at that time. Anything else that you might think of to add to that? Like what's the difference between a pilgrim and a tourist? I think you came up with a pretty good breadth of ideas. So a little bit about the history of Iona's Abbey. The Abbey's history stretches back to 563, when Saint Columba traveled from Ireland with 12 companions in a coracle, which is a boat, wooden frame with leather on the outside, and they came over from Ireland. And they started this monastic community that was influential in the spread of the gospel. Iona became known as the cradle of Christianity for Scotland. So coming over at that time, they established their monastery, and then their mission was to go out in small groups to set up their huts in the midst of their pagan neighbors. Columba called these their colonies of heaven. And they went out and wanted to seek to attract people to the gospel by the way of their life, their care for all, and the preaching and practice of their faith. So that was like the home base for them to go out and do this. Columba arrived in 563 and established this monastic community. He died in 596. And the monastery was raided over the years several times by the Vikings. And you still, when we were walking around, there's somebody's little boat, looks like a Viking boat. If you see the head there. So there's still influences of the Vikings there. When we were there the week before our group was at the Abbey, that group that came, they said some of them came from Denmark, and they brought with them all these gifts that they gave to the staff of the Abbey. And they said, our people took a lot from you back in the day. We thought we should bring something back. So I thought it was fun. They got a kick out of it. But yeah, the monastery was raided several times by the Vikings. The Abbey was attacked in 795. And then there was subsequent attacks in 802, 806, and 825. And this 806 one, the Vikings arrived, and there's a bay there, they call it Martyrs Bay for this reason, because they arrived and the monks went down from the Abbey to meet them and greet them and welcome them as Christian hospitality. And 68 of the monks were massacred. When I was there, they also told us that some of the monks who survived, or I don't know how this worked, or maybe there were more at the Abbey, but they brought some of the Vikings back to the Abbey, and some of them consequently became Christians. I think it's just amazing, the power of their witness in the face of that. But yeah, and as a result of these invasions, the monks relocated to a new abbey of Kells in Ireland. And the Book of Kells, which you might be familiar with, is a beautiful illustrated manuscript of the four Gospels. And they think it was probably written on Iona, but when they left after these Viking raids to go back to Ireland, that's when it went back. You can see that now in Dublin, Ireland. But they wanted to save it from the marauding Vikings that kept coming. Then in 1203, what was left of the timber monastery was replaced with a stone-built abbey. And then that abbey that was made of stone was refurbished, rebuilt in the 1500s. But when the Reformation came, it was no longer the Church of England, it fell into disrepair after the Reformation. So this is like a sense of just the disrepair of it, and what it looks like now. You can kind of see some of the differences there. So the Reverend George MacLeod is, he was a minister, a parish minister in Glasgow in Scotland. He was visionary, he was a social reformer, and he was driven by a belief that faith should be grounded in action. They say kind of where it really came alive for him that he was ministering to a man who was dying, who was very harsh in criticism against the church, feeling like they didn't really practice what they proclaimed. And that really he took that to heart. And in 1938, he founded what is called the Iona Community, which still exists today. He established it as an ecumenical Christian community that is working for peace and social justice. And at that time, he gathered young ministers who were seminarians and had them work closely with builders and craftsmen in the gradual restoration of those ruins of the Abbey, to restore. He had this vision of restoring the Abbey. He died in 1991, but he left behind this beautiful religious center, which still is people are coming as pilgrims as we did to today. Still has an influence, the Iona community. So if you want to really get into the Iona community, you can just Google the Iona community. You can get to their webpage to learn about them in even more depth. But this is kind of who they describe themselves to be. We believe in the transformational power of community to change lives and the world. Only in community, they say, can justice and love be done. We are part of the global church. Our members are inspired by a shared commitment to Jesus Christ. We believe that work for justice, peace, and an equitable society is a matter of urgency, and that we have a responsibility to live in a right relationship with the whole of God's creation. So this physical rebuilding of the ruins of the Abbey became and remains a sign of hope for the rebuilding of individual lives and of community in Scotland and beyond, globally. The community and the living spaces of the Iona Abbey were reopened in 2021. So you think about the shutdown during the pandemic. And I could not find this, but my husband said before we left on our pilgrimage, he went on the Iona Community website, but he found when they dedicated the reopened, refurbished building again, Princess Anne, I guess, gave a lot of money towards helping that happen, that they had a video of her helicopter like landing on Iona, and then they had a worship service, and she left on her helicopter. But having been there 21 years ago and having been there this time, it was beautiful. You know, I mean, it was beautiful before, but just the living spaces where your rooms are, where you're staying, they've done a really good job, very mindful of being of creation care and the way that they built things. I think they won an award for it. So you have the Abbey. There's also what's called the MacLeod Center, which is owned by the Iona Community. It's across the little road from the Abbey, and it's a center for young adults, but there's also nice meeting rooms. So we would do some of our large group conversations over there. We had a fun talent show one night. There's also an art room over there that you could use. That's where I painted the little stones. If you saw those stones that John showed you, that's where I painted those stones. Knowing that John and his family were coming the week after, I was thinking, I don't know, are children going to appreciate this? You know, I knew John and Rachel, so I write their names on a stone. If you weren't here to hear that, I painted their names on a stone, decorated them. So for his 3 children, they were traveling with another friend who lives in Scotland. So they got, I sent him pictures of the stones, pictures of where I was hiding them, knowing he's been there. And I was, you know, thinking, I don't think anybody would disturb them, but I wanted to keep them out of sight from just a casual person walking around that wouldn't pick them up. And so he knew where they were. And then he sent me a video of the children when they found them. And then their friend had painted a rock for their son too. So everybody got a rock, all the children. Iona Community also has a center called Camas on the Isle of Mull, which is a space for young people to come and have kind of a wilderness experience, living there and immersed in the wilderness together. The Iona Community is made up right now of about 280 individuals who are scattered globally. The majority of them are in the UK, but there are groups, people all over the world. They also have a growing young adults group as well around, and they have about 2,000 associate members and friends worldwide. So the people who are making commitment to be in the Iona Community, they meet in small local groups where they live, and they call them family groups. And those would be scattered around different regions. And it's through these regions and the family groups that members then are accountable to one another for living and keeping their rule of life, which I will show you on the next slide. Iona at the Abbey, they have some paid staff, not many, but there are a few people that are paid staff. But they also would have like the warden. So one of the Iona Community members gets elected to be the warden for the Abbey. I think it's a 1 or 2 year term, so you know they're there living at the Abbey. But then you always have a resident Iona Community member in residence at the Abbey for a week. So I will show you a slide in a little bit of who that was. There's a lot of volunteer staff. So you've got a few paid staff, but a lot of volunteer staff who make this work. And they really emphasize living together in community, sharing a common life with one another and with the guests who are coming to the Abbey. So the Iona Community's rule that they live by, one is daily prayer and worship with others and regular engagement in the Bible and other material which nourishes them. Their second rule is working for justice and peace, wholeness and reconciliation in their localities, in society, and in the whole of creation. The third is supporting one another in prayer by meeting, communicating, and accounting with one another for the use of their gifts, money, and time, their use of the earth's resources, and then sharing in corporate life and organization of the community. So they all, like I said, they had that resident of the community and residents with us. You have the warden. So this rule is central to their life and witness, and it binds them together and to be accountable to each other in these family groups. So I went on the Iona Community website, and you can actually join in their morning worship every day. So I went looking this week. This is from Wednesday's morning worship service. And worship is such a huge part of what Iona is about. I just wanted to immerse you in a little bit of it. So we're going to listen. I'm going to play this and you're going to listen. This is one of the hymns that was sung. And when I practiced this earlier in the week, our connection was kind of jerky. You know, it would start and then it would like get behind. So I apologize ahead of time if that happens, but I think you'll still hear it and be blessed. And the words are so beautiful. So let's take a listen to that.
Blessed are the ones I call the poor, my love and oh my joy. Blessed are the ones I call the poor, who dearly love me. I call the poor, the kingdom is their own for sure. God's kingdom is of heaven.
I'm sorry, this is really bad.
Blessed are the ones who deeply mourn. Hey, my love and oh, my joy. Blessed are the ones who love me. Blessed are the ones who deeply mourn. God's comfort in their hearts is known. God's kingdom is of heaven, of earth, of fire, of love.
Well, you get a sense of it. I apologize.
Could you sing it for us?
No.
Got a
No.
good voice.
No.
Jennie,
Yes.
was that a choir or was that everybody there singing that?
I don't know because they don't have cameras in the Abbey, so I don't know what.
It's beautiful.
It was beautiful. Go on their website. You can pull these up. You can listen to them. You know, if I wasn't showing it through here and just had on my computer, you'd hear it. It doesn't do that. We have a problem. We have to figure this out with our Ethernet or something.
It's a problem with Zoom.
Yeah.
It's notorious for lag time problems.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So I do encourage you, check out the Iona Community, Google it, just check out their website. You can worship with them every day. As I know, like when we would worship, they would ask us not to record anything or take pictures while that was going on, because they're trying to just keep it worshipful.
Simple.
It's simple, it's worshipful, we're not putting on a show. But you can do it, and because they're not cameras, you're seeing words and you're hearing voices, but you're not seeing the video of it. But worship morning and evening are central to being in community at the Iona Abbey. So Abbey morning worship, there's every morning you have worship to begin your day. So Sunday, you arrive on a Saturday, and there's a Saturday evening worship service, but then Sunday's your first morning there worship service. And that's a communion service, and you'll get people from, who are just visiting the island or, living on the island, would join us, and they invited any of us that were there if we wanted to help in serving communion. So I got to do that, which was really awesome. So the altar is way up here. This is called the choir, and the nave is back here. There's more seats that come back. And there was one of the people like us who's a pilgrim, and she was an Anglican priest, and she was there, and she led our communion service. So it was an Anglican service, that one. But other days of the week, Monday through Thursday, your worship is at 9 in the morning. So you first have your breakfast, then you have your worship, and then I'll tell you later what else you do. On Friday morning, worship's at 8 because most of us are leaving after that. So you have to catch the ferry. You need to have worship a little earlier so you can get down to the ferry if you're going on. And then they do have a Saturday morning worship, which I guess would be more the staff and volunteers that are there, because usually the guests don't arrive till afternoon, sometime on Saturday. At the end of the service in the morning, you remain standing. You do not have a benediction, because the whole idea is that your day is worship, that you go forward carrying an attitude of worship as you go about your day. So there's not a benediction. You don't sit down at the end. They invited, there were staff volunteers there, but they invited any of us who were pilgrims there for the week, if we wanted to take part in services and leading morning or evening. And so I got to do some of that, but it was really fun watching these 3 teenage boys from Swarthmore that were there. So I thought, I'm just curious what they're thinking. What did they think this was going to be like? It's so different. And I just watched them warm up as the week went on. The one boy who was there who didn't have a parent with him, the other 2, their parents were there. But the one who didn't, he really emerged. Like when adults were gathering in common rooms just for conversation, he was right joining in. And so he really dived in. But the other 2 warmed up over the week too. And it was really beautiful to see them become part of the leading the worship and all of that as well. Guests, you're welcome to explore the worship spaces in and around the Abbey, in the Abbey Church. There's various chapels. There's the St. Oran's Chapel, which is where the kings of Scotland and all these others are buried. There is St. Michael's Chapel too. But you're welcome to explore any of that along the way. There were always places you could light candles if you wanted, with prayers. Then your evening worship at the Abbey. In the evening, there was a focus for each day of the week's worship. And so the Monday service focus is justice and peace. The Tuesday evening service is prayers for healing for individuals or for the world. The Wednesday service is an agape meal, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, which is shared around a common table. The Thursday evening service is a service of commitment, often led a lot with involvement of the guests. And Friday evening, there was no service. That's when all the guests have departed, and I guess the staff just need time to themselves. The Saturday, when you arrive, usually you're arriving in the afternoon. So that evening, there's a service of welcome, and that's when the guests usually are coming in and starting to worship together. And then that Sunday evening service is a service of quiet time for reflection together. And one of the things I enjoyed and appreciated about the worship, it's very creative. It's not cookie cutter, you never knew. Lots of different books, Well, this is my Iona Abbey book. It's the one I bought 21 years ago. Bought the new one, which is at my house right now. My husband and I are sharing it. But there's other books there with music, with prayers, things when you do the Lord's Prayer. They have different versions of it, but they always invite people, wherever you're from, whatever wording is comfortable when you pray it in that way. So it's a mixture of experiences, very unique and beautiful. These are 2 women who are guests, like my husband and I, pilgrims, and so they volunteered to help in the evening. So they were the acolytes lighting candles in the Abbey at night. So when you leave on the ferry from Mull and take off, so there's the ferry coming, we're all standing here waiting to get on the ferry. And then the ferry takes you out, and when you get where the Abbey comes into view, your heart just lifts. It just lifts. And then, as I said, in that first video, or that first slide, there's that road that you walk up from the jetty and up to the Abbey. And there's the Road of the Dead, which is where the the kings and all the people that were going to be buried in that graveyard around the St. Orange Chapel. So beyond the Road of the Dead by St. Orange Chapel lies St. Martin's Cross, which is what you're seeing right there. It's the sole intact survivor of 4 medieval Irish high crosses that once stood in this area on Iona. They probably served as markers to lead pilgrims along the route to St. Columba's Shrine and the Abbey, and they served as places to stop and pray. So you can see a shadow of a Celtic cross over here. So that's another cross that was rebuilt. That wasn't the original one. And this little section of the Abbey, that's St. Columba's Shrine. I don't think he's buried in there. I mean, things I've read, sounds like they took his bones back to Ireland, but there might be somebody who would say differently, but it's a shrine to him there. But these Celtic crosses, so there is that one, there's this one, and then there was another along the walk up from the ferry, still standing. Again, it was a rebuilt one, and there had been a 4th one somewhere. I don't know where that was. I found those crosses just beautiful. Let's see. So this is a picture of the newly renovated quarters. Of those who've been to Iona, how many of you actually did a week in the Abbey? Okay, Jean and Bob, anybody else? So do you remember how long ago you were in the Abbey?
We were there 4 different times.
Okay.
Between 89 and
88.
well, 88.
Okay, so you were there a lot in a frequent amount.
We helped finish off McLeod Center.
Oh, nice,
It was
nice.
not finished when we were there. We were
Okay.
part of the work project that finished McLeod.
Okay, very nice. Yeah.
It looks very luxurious.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they really, so there was a desk over here. These were closets. When I was there before, I had a bed by the window, which I just loved. So my husband was here. He had a window at the foot of his bed. They have more bathrooms now. It used to be just like one bathroom. So there's more bathrooms, and they're very, like I said, very conscientious about earth care. And so the shower, if you push the button to turn on the shower, it only stayed on for like 30 seconds or 20 seconds, the water would shut off and then you have to push it again, but the idea that you're not just wasting water and going down that way. The lights, sort of like we've done in our bathrooms here now, the lights will turn off if there's nobody in the bathroom on their own, when there's motion. Same in the hallways if somebody came out. So if you opened your door, you go to the bathroom in the night, the hall's dark, but as soon as you enter, the light comes on, and walk into the bathroom, light comes on, goes off. So they did a lot. Yeah, but simple, but very accommodating. When you arrive, you have your bedding all there, but you make your bed. So when you stay at the Abbey, you're very much part of the sustaining of the community. Everybody has a little part that they do to be part of this. So you make your own bed. There's a journal in the room. So pilgrims before you left, their reflections or art, some people drew things and whatnot. So there's a little canvas bag hanging on the peg that had that artwork in it. I think it has some colored pencils and things if you wanted. So you could read what somebody who'd been before you's reflections were, but you could also leave your reflections for someone to come after you. So that's part of that receiving and giving back. So Tom Gordon, which you saw him in John's presentation, he was the Iona Community member in residence. He was with us that week and he was staying another week. So he was going to be in residence for 2 weeks. And John was showing you pictures with Henry and Lena after the midday worship service where he came up to them. He's a very loving and amazing, gracious gentleman. And he came up to them knowing they were so little and was showing them, some carvings in the Abbey that, you know, the monkey and the other thing was. But I thought, what a beautiful, that was Tom. Just like he would think to notice these little children and what would be of interest to them and to take them under his wing. Tom is a retired Church of Scotland pastor. He was a hospice chaplain, and he's a prolific writer. So across from the Abbey, there's a little bookstore that's part of, I think, the Abbey, that I think the proceeds support the work of the Iona community in the Abbey. And so he was one afternoon reading from one of his books. So Steve and I went over and thoroughly enjoyed it. Ended up buying more books. We're retiring. What are we doing buying more books? He does reflections for the 3-year cycle of the lectionary readings. That's what we bought. It's like, but he read one of his stories from that, and yeah. So he's an amazing person. And we're also receiving his daily reflections. Like while we were there, some of the people, they were like, are you getting Tom's daily reflections? He sends them out by email. Like, no, so I signed up. So every day there's Tom Gordon's reflections in my mailbox. It's kind of fun to keep hearing what he has to say. So when you get to your room, you also find a little welcome booklet with your schedule for the week. So inside the schedule, so you know what's happening each day, and there is a rhythm. You will share your meals in the refectory. I'll have some pictures of that coming up soon. You worship in the Abbey Church, and about midweek, we discovered this as the same thing happened like 21 years ago. We didn't know it until about midweek, that there's a way to get from your room directly into the chapel without having to go outside and walk through the cloister to get there. Did you probably knew that. You were there more often. Well, we forgot, when we came back, it's like, oh, and then midweek somebody was doing it. Like, oh yeah, I forgot. We could just like walk down that. So you share your meals in the refectory, you worship in the Abbey Church, and you have task teams where you have chores. So every morning after our worship, you went with your task team for about 30 minutes and you were given an assignment. That was your chore for the week. So you kind of lickety-split got to where you went. My chore was to clean the sinks, and I had several bathrooms that were part of it wasn't like where I was staying, but there was another part where maybe, I don't know who was staying there, maybe some of the volunteers who were there for 3 months at a time or something. But we would clean their little bathroom. So I was doing the sinks, the mirrors, trash, and getting new towels if they needed to be replaced, and putting the others in the laundry. You have your rubber gloves, you pick up your rubber gloves, you pick up your apron. It's very efficient. You get done what you need to do, and somebody else is mopping the floors, somebody else is doing the toilets, somebody else is doing the showers, somebody else is doing something else, so some are helping in the refectory. There's a lot of little chores, but everybody participates. Everybody does their part in community to make this work. After your task team chores, then there are always optional activities in the morning, afternoon, evening. It's really up to you. You can choose to do none of that, or you can do it all. I tended to like to go over to the McLeod Center, and there were some gatherings where there was a little kind of input time, and we'd have good conversations and did some creative things together. Evening worship then is after dinner in the evening around 9. So dinner's earlier in the evening. What time is that? Dinner's at 6. So then you have a couple hours, to do what you wanted to do after dinner. So that would be called open spaces, open mic night. So all week long, they're like, who wants to sign up for the talent show? And so they put some of us in charge. I wasn't one of them, but some of our pilgrims in charge of like coordinating that, and then we just had fun on Thursday evening over in the McLeod Center with all these little talent show performances. So just a lot of camaraderie and lightheartedness and fun. So a major part of every week's rhythm of things that are offered, there's always the Iona pilgrimage, and that is offered on Tuesday, I believe, yes. So that would be offered if you were doing the off-road pilgrimage, that's like a 7-mile pilgrimage. If that's too hard for you and you wanted to do an on-road pilgrimage, you could do an on-road pilgrimage. And what the pilgrimage is, everyone is welcome to join, whichever one suits them, or you don't have to go on a pilgrimage if you choose not to. But you then walk around the island to different places, and you visit some places of historical and religious significance, and you reflect. There'd be, you know, times of silence, maybe we'd sing a little bit, but times to reflect about what happened there, and then think about your own life, and there'd be kind of questions to get you to reflect on your own life and how this might be speaking to you. At each station, and there's somebody leading it, that person would stop and read it. This worship book has the whole pilgrimage, all the words to the pilgrimage in it. This was one of those things that I would use for years when my husband and I were serving as co-pastors in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. I was in charge of the confirmation process. So we'd always start our year with a retreat, and I would take the down to Turkey Point in Maryland. My parents had a house out there, and I pulled from this pilgrimage and I created our pilgrimage. So we would walk around Turkey Point in different places, and I kind of adjusted wording so it reflected that place. But again, it's that mindset of pilgrimage as your life, and of seeing your whole life's journey as pilgrimage. So the pilgrimage is for me, a very hallowed part of the experience of being on Iona. I confess this time I did not do the long one because it was pouring rain that day, pouring rain. My husband did the 7-mile, I did the shorter one, and I was soaked and cold. But when our kids were there, we both did the whole thing, and I was very disappointed that I didn't do the whole thing, but it's like I couldn't. I was so wet; it was just dumping water that day. Next time I go back, I'm bringing like full rain gear. You know, I didn't have hiking boots either, but this is again part of this generosity. The people that were volunteers there for months, they said, "Oh, we've got a room full of hiking boots and things, so you could borrow." So I just went down and found a pair of hiking boots that fit my feet, and so I borrowed the hiking boots. And then they have a room, so everybody came back just soaked. Their clothes were, so they had this room that they created. They call it a drying room. That would get hot and your clothes dry out. And it's an experience, but the pilgrimage is so worth it. It's such an amazing part of it. So on the pilgrimage, some of the sites you'd stop at, or you often start at the St. Martin's Cross, which is that big cross that I showed you. You'd stop by the Augustinian Nunnery, the Marble Quarry, St. Columba's Bay, the Macker. So this is the Macker, the Hermit's Cell, which is some stone circles where they think Columba might have gone there, like it's his place to daily pray. And the first time I was there, they told us that he would go there every day and recite the entire Psalms. I don't know if that's true, but he did. That's pretty impressive. There's the Hermit, or that's the Hermit Cell. There's Dunny, and I know John showed you that. That's the high point on Iona, so you can hike up there, and you're looking down at the Abbey. And then there's St. Oran's Chapel. And outside the McLeod Center, I don't know if this was there when you were there, the fallen Christ, was that statue there? I didn't notice it at first, you know, it was like a couple days in, it's like, oh, look to your left. And this was there. So it was sculpted in 1997 by Ronald Ray. And this was on a plaque, this quote said, "His shoulders ache with the weariness of others, his brow lacerated by their twisted expectations." So, this island, you just would come upon things like that, which take your breath away, and it gives you pause to think and reflect. This is the cloister of the Abbey. So before I figured out, oh yeah, there's a way I can take stairs directly into the Abbey. You'd come outdoors and you'd be walking along. And in the center is the statue of the Incarnation. So you see the Holy Spirit of the dove, and this is Mary. So the idea of God coming and the incarnation of Christ in that. St. Orange Chapel sits in this graveyard where all these kings are buried. And this is the Iona Peace Garden, which is in front of the Abbey. Was that there when you were there? So the Peace Garden is there. So when I hid the stones I painted for John's children, I hid them under that bench, like right in there. So I took pictures of everything, like, all right, John. I knew he'd been there. I knew he would know where the Peace Garden. I knew he would, like, here's the picture, so he knew right where to lead them. And this is Dunny over here. So Iona Beauty, it takes my breath away whenever I'm there. Lots of sheep on Iona sometimes. So this was Saturday when we arrived, and we were walking from the Abbey down to the North Shore, and we're hearing this horrible sounds of these sheep, loud. Well, they were getting sheared. As we're going by, you're finding, clumps of wool all over the place. And down here, there are two farmers, and they like herd a certain section of them in there, and then we watched, like, oh my gosh, they like manhandle them, like, get this fleece off and then let them go. And so they're all like newly haircut, they're out there. So that was kind of a fun thing. And then just the rocks, the beautiful, beautiful rocks. When I was there the first time, this was part of the pilgrimage. I did not do this time, but when I was the last time, I found there's Iona rock, which is this little green polished rock that I found a piece. I've been looking for it and I cannot find it, but people sometimes make jewelry out of that. Just beautiful, rugged. Sometimes the sheep are fenced, but there are other times where they're just wandering all over the place, on their own, I guess they know when to go home. This is the North Shore beach that, we were walking to get to when we went by all the sheep. So notice me in a jacket. Notice these women, these are part of our group. They are from the UK in the water. And these were the teenagers from Swarthmore in the water. It was not the Jersey Shore temperatures that we're used to go in the water. But isn't it gorgeous? And that turquoise blue of the water. I remember the first time being there, I was just taken aback. I did not expect it to be so turquoise. Just beautiful. I ended up buying a print of a painting and had it framed. It's now sitting in my basement of the North Shore beach. Just a beautiful, beautiful place. Another highlight of the week, which I know John touched on, is to take it's an optional thing, but we did it before we did it again. You take a ferry ride over to another little tiny island of Staffa. And this one's really like a half mile by a quarter mile. It's a very tiny little island. And it's these basalt columns are from volcanic eruption. Fingal's Cave. So this is Fingal's Cave. The first time we went, our ferry didn't take us in this time, but like our ferry took us into the cave. And Mendelssohn wrote, if you've heard of Mendelssohn's
Fingal's Cave.
Fingal's Cave. So he was inspired by that to do that. But there's all kinds of wildlife up here, but the puffin colony was really the draw that took us there. So, your ferry brings you in, you get off. It's hard to see here. Then you're climbing up these rocks. They had some stairs built in, but it was kind of steep. You get up here and then you walk back along the high cliffs and you find puffins. And they told us the puffins want to be around humans because the gulls are their enemies. So when the humans show up, the gulls leave them alone. So they don't run from you. We had like a rope in the grass, like don't go past that, I guess, just so you're not disturbing them, but you also don't fall off the cliff. Both good things. So this is Steve and I at the top. And then puffins galore, I call this one. I mean, they were everywhere. It was like pigeons in the park. It's like, oh gosh.
Wow.
Puffins everywhere you turn, there were puffins. The first time we were there, 21 years ago, a guy from our group was sitting on the ground and this one puffin just stood there and stared at him. And the guy got up eventually, and then the puffin went in. He was apparently sitting over the entrance to his nest or her nest. Couldn't get in, So I don't remember that string being there when we were there before that told you like don't go past that. So maybe that's it. Did you go to Staffa? I'm sure you did. It's kind of, you have to do
They're
that.
unreal.
Yeah. These little clown faces are just so cute. So this is the agape service. It was one of the evenings, which they do every week, an agape service, which is a fellowship meal. It's an ancient tradition of the church, and it's always an open table, which expresses our unity in Christ. And in an agape feast, you use oat cakes and water. So this table was set, and you notice the rainbow on the table. So we were there during Pride Month. And so the focus of that agape feast was LGBTQ plus community. So again, during worship, there'd be times sometimes, and this was one where they would just give a reflection question. You would just turn to your neighbor and you would pass the oat cakes in the water, and you would just be eating your oat cake and drinking your water and talking with each other. And it was an awesome experience. So this is after the service because you're not allowed to take pictures during the service. So this is kind of their cleaning up afterwards. But some of the stories, this was the warden, who was the warden for Iona while we were there. This man is from the Netherlands. She's from Sweden. She came by sailboat. She is very much environmental minded, didn't want to contribute anymore to the carbon footprint. So she signed on to be a crew on a sailboat that was going to Spain. And she got off, I guess, on the mainland somewhere and then came over the rest of the way. But it's like, this is the kind of people you meet there. I'm just trying to see, UK. Yeah, so people from all over the world there. It's really rich. And this is also because it's not Holy Communion in the way, we celebrate, that lay people can lead it. So it's really a celebration of the ministry of the whole people of God in the service that you celebrate your life together. And then bread and justice. So this is a typical prayer. Your meals would start with a time of silence and a prayer that somebody would offer. You have your meal, and then at the end of the meal, you'd also have a time of silence and prayer. And so this was a very typical grace that is often used at the Abbey. I ended up buying an Abbey cookbook that had just come out, so I had that from home. And this was listed inside the Abbey cookbook. Oh God, to those who are hungry, give bread, and to those who have bread, give a hunger for justice. So I think this gives you a flavor of what this community is about. Very much wanting to be authentic in their Christian practice and witness. So this is a sample of one of the tables in the refectory. That's my husband, Steve, if you don't know him. These folks were all UK. She was from France. These were the Swarthmore, that's the pastor and the sons. She was from the UK. And the question every night at the end of the dinner was always, who wants porridge in the morning? So those who wanted porridge raised their hands because they would make enough porridge. You know, I guess if you didn't want porridge, they didn't want to make more porridge than you needed to have. I always ask for porridge. And then table fellowship. So it was rich, just a rich time of fellowship. The meals are prepared so as to optimize human health and environmental sustainability. The meals were mainly plant-based, supplemented with some meat and dairy and fish from responsibly reared or sourced animals. The day we went to Staffa, my husband and I decided there was like a little tavern in town on the way down to get on the ferry. And we thought, let's just go get lunch there. And when I went in there, they had on the menu, a special for the day was langoustine, which like, I didn't know what that was. They're like shrimp. Is that right? Is it the same as shrimp or is that a different thing than shrimp, Ian?
It's a different type of, it's in the shrimp.
Yeah, so the fishermen had just caught that. So I guess every Wednesday they bring in what they caught and langoustine. So I ordered that. It was delicious. They're very conscientious about the foods that they served, wanting to get it from local sources and be fair and good to the environment. As you can see at the far end, they've got Black Lives Matter, the LGBTQ plus, peace. I think that's South. I'm not sure what all of it meant, but very social minded, justice oriented in their thinking and in their practice of their faith. So inside our welcome booklet, when we arrived, this little booklet, these were words that were good words to remember, especially as you're leaving to return to home. In work and worship, God is with us. Gathered and scattered, God is with us. Now and always, God is with us. So this is also from the Wednesday prayer. This was at the end of the morning service. This is not singing, so I don't know if we can actually, if you want to join in with the little blue part at the end, like this would be on their website. Somebody's reading the first part. It's sort of a litany, and then you could participate on your own. I don't know if the sound's going to work, but let's give it a try. Yep, it's not. Okay. We'll just pause it. We can say it on our own. So imagine a Scottish accent. Oh God, you gave to your servant Columba gifts of courage, faith, and cheerfulness, and sent out your servants from Iona to carry your gospel to every creature. Further in all things, the purpose of this community, that hidden things may be revealed to us and new ways found to touch the hearts of all. May we preserve with each other sincere charity and peace, and if it be your holy will, grant that this place of your abiding continue still to be a sanctuary and light. Amen. And this is that would be the ferry where people are going to get on, and your heart is full, but you're also, leaving to take the blessings you've received and to share it where you're sent. Steve and I are considering now, we're retiring in early 2024, and we are considering in retirement returning to Iona for 2 or 3 months to serve as volunteers. So stay tuned. I don't know. My father is still living. He'll turn 94 in January. So I wouldn't want to be there if something, well, when something happens. So it might be after he's no longer with us, but that's our hope, to be able to go back and stay for 2 or 3 months as volunteers so that we can provide that hospitality and welcome for others as they did so graciously for us. So my last slide, this is the farewell send-off. So we're on the ferry and Steve took this little video and it's like, oh my gosh. So this is what they did to send us off. So I think the Wild Goose, so the Iona Community has worship resources, and Wild Goose Resources is their publishing company. The Wild Goose representing the Holy Spirit. So I think that's probably what that was. So they're sending us off with the Wild Goose. So that's everything I have. I could probably stick around for another 10 minutes if anybody has any questions, or those who've been, if you have comments from your experiences. Yeah, Jean.
I would like to make one comment, a little bit of addition there, since this is Commitment Sunday. When we were there, learned that one of the focuses of being a member, one of the 200 or so members of Iona Community, is to meet monthly as a community group, as well as they have an annual meeting. But monthly, they talk about different things, and one of them is accountability. And they talk about everything belongs to God. And there is what we turn back to God, which is they're required to tithe. They were required to tithe, but they're also asked to be accountable to the community as how they deal with the other 90%. That also is God's. And so as we today, made our commitments, we can make our commitment for what we're going to do with our other 90% too.
Thank you. That's really very good insight. Yep. We'll get you to do the sermon.
So did the sun ever shine?
It did. This was not as sunny a week as we had the first time we were there, but it would come and go. Like that day we went and had our lunch before getting on the ferry. We're sitting outside. It was sunny. It was beautiful. I have pictures of Steve and I at the picnic table with another pilgrim. He was from the Netherlands, and sunny. And then we're like, oh, we better get down to the ferry. And we're walking down. It's like, I'm feeling raindrops. And then there's a picture of me on the ferry, which with this, it was raining. It's like, oh my gosh. So they had these big, heavy yellow raincoats that the fishermen would wear. So like it was way, the arms like were down to here. I'm in that. But then by the time we got to Staffa, it had stopped. So I just had my hat on and my jacket. So it would come and go. The day of the pilgrimage was the worst. That was absolutely worse. It was dumping. But yeah, we did get some sun. But I also know before we came in Scotland and England, it had, a long stretch of no rain.
Yep.
And the ground was getting brown and, climate change. So they were very concerned about that. So they were really happy that we were getting the rain, and that tempered it for me. It's like, this is needed. This is good. So, we can get by. Like I said, the only one day that really kept me from doing the whole pilgrimage was the day it just dumped. Yeah, Ernie.
Can you share a little bit about the inner pilgrimage that went along with the outer pilgrimage that you showed us?
So for me, it's again that I feel connected to God there in ways I don't always feel as connected here. And I think it's that shared commitment to justice and peace, that shared commitment to worship, care for creation, all of that. And inside me, I think, oh, I just feel like I can be myself here in ways I don't always feel when I come back. And to be with other people who are committed in that same way is really freeing. I think for Steve and I, heading into retirement, like that for us was part of that, trying to be mindful when, our 10%, but the 90% is God's too. So we're retiring, but God has given us vocation, whether we're retired or whether we're working as, getting a paycheck. So I want to be part of that, is just trying to listen and be mindful of what, for this next portion of our lives, is God calling and inviting us to do with our lives. That is also vocation, is also giving back, is also ministry, without it being, your day in, day out, you have to be at a meeting, you have to do this. So I think that was part of my inner journey of trying to listen, to be open. I don't have it figured out, and I'm not trying to rush figuring it out, but that one thought came, I think maybe God would call us back to volunteer for a couple months. Yeah.
It seemed like an important theme that they kept emphasizing is that of justice.
Yes.
And I wondered if that was just because of particular events around Ireland and Scotland, things like that, or, I mean, it's not like they're missionaries going out, sending missionaries around the specific missions all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much that, but why particularly an emphasis on justice? I guess I was.
I think justice anywhere that, people are treated with equity, are treated fairly, are treated with dignity and respect, is part of gospel, foundational to the gospel, which they are very committed to. So I think that's part of it.
Not a particular
thing, but yeah, no, they're very, they're members around the world. They're bringing in concerns from around the world, things that are important.
So apolitical, not.
Yeah, no, it's apolitical, but it's apolitical, but also political, not partisan, in that you're seeking to get a just society for all people to thrive as God intends them. So it isn't a partisan political, but God cares about the way we treat each other and take care of it and live together. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Is the ferry provided by the government?
We paid to go on it.
Oh, it's a business.
Yeah. You pay to go on the ferry.
The ferry company provides ferries that go to all the Scottish Islands, goes up to the Orkneys, and most of them go out of Oban.
Yeah, well, this was interesting. So 21 years ago, when we were there, I think they said there were 90 people living on Iona. There are 150 now. And I noticed there were some newer buildings. And what they told us is there's a little school on Iona. And they had gotten like very few, there were only about 3 children left. And they were going to have to close down this school, which would mean these children were going to have to take a ferry over to another place. I mean, it's a big thing. And so during COVID, they did some fundraising, making soup and things like this, and they put in for a grant from the government, and they got funding for affordable housing to be built on Iona, which is what we were seeing, for families, so that people who work on Iona could live on Iona and their children could go to school on Iona, which I thought was just a beautiful thing. So I think teenagers have to leave Iona, take the ferry like on a Monday, take the bus over, somewhere in Mall, board for a week, come home at the end of the week, come back, so it's a lot of journeying, but I believe they told us that the government had said that they passed a law where no children should have to cross water to go to school. So they didn't have enough kids on the island to support a school. They were going to have to, people couldn't, just how do you live there if you have children and work? So,
Thank you.
well, thank you all for listening.
So much.
Yeah. Oh, and this is my little Iona bracelet. So to get in, since we were there the last time, you didn't have to pay to go into Iona. Was that the way it was when you were, like, if you were just visiting the island, you could just walk into the Abbey? And
Correct.
now you have to pay. So the historic Scotland, like the trust. So there's a little booth, and a fence, and you have to pay to go in, and that money, is helping to keep. There's a little museum there, this thing. So since we were staying at the Abbey, we were given these little bracelets. So we just showed these, and we couldn't walk in. And we learned the code. There were certain gates that there was a code. We learned the code that you could just hit the code and open the gate to come in. So this was our ticket in for the Abbey.
I've forgotten, are there other places to stay on the island?
Yeah, there are. There.
Bed and breakfast type place?
Yeah, bed and breakfast. There's a little hotel. Fiona, Allison, you all know Fiona? She told me that when she was in college, she worked at one of those hotels one summer, and she met George McLeod, who's the founder of Iona Community.
Enjoy your grandchildren.
I will. I will.
Safe
Yeah.
travels.
Thank you. Thank
Have you
you.
been